Well, let's stay with the census, and one group of people that is quite difficult to measure is the homeless. For more on this, we're joined by PeterDurie from Sydney Homeless Connect. Peter, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's just talk through how the census actually measures the homeless. It's actually quite hard to figure out how many people are homeless. You can go by things like, dwelling, you live in a tent, you're not living in anywhere secure. How do you get your figures?
Yeah, sure. So we've worked with the ABS on previous counts that they've done, and they do have a special team set up to go out and count the homeless.
Yeah.
So they do have a team that tackles that. We also work with City of Sydney data that goes out and counts rough sleepers as well. And then we work with a whole bunch of service providers who provide us with data and information about folks that are homeless, so we can try and gauge how big the problem is and then how we can help.
So how big is the problem?
Yeah, so it's tough to say. I mean, the last census, which was probably many years ago now, had 105,000 rough sleepers across Australia every night, or people who were homeless, so people that may be sort of secondary homeless, couch surfers, that kind of thing as well.
Okay, and that's about sort of 0.5% of the population. It's funny when statistics are broken down into percentages. It may be only, in inverted commas, 0.5% of the population, but the life that these people are living is effectively, you can't sort of measure it in terms of percentage, right?
No, you can't measure it in that. And the other thing is, what's the cost to society? How can we live in a country like Australia, such a great place, and allow people to be homeless and not do something about it?
So from your perspective of working with so many homeless people and organisations, how is that possible? Why is that happening?
Yeah, so look, I think it's anything in a big society like this, people fall through the cracks. People, don't necessarily make bad choices. They make choices that often don't turn out the best for them. And they end up in a bad place for whatever reason. Our job at Sydney Homeless Connect is to get those guys connected with the services they need and get them into a better place.
So you had a big event at Town Hall today. This happens once a year when
Correct.
homeless can connect with all these services, get some vaccinations, get injections, get advice on work, get advice on health, all those sorts of things. How difficult is it for someone who's been sleeping rough, whose sense of self might be quite low, to have the courage to connect to services and say, I need help in all these different areas?
Yeah, it can be very difficult, and you've described exactly the reason that we started Sydney Homeless Connect. So if you imagine a whole bunch of service providers that someone may need scattered across the city, it's very difficult if it's, for them just to get to the first service provider. But imagine needing to see 3 or 4 or 5 of these people. To do that can be really challenging for a lot of people. What we do is we get all those folks into the town hall for one day. So when you get to the first service provider, you need to get to the second one. They're on the next table.
Yeah, okay, so you keep moving down the line.
Correct.
And you come out with all this information at the end.
Yeah.
One of the issues that's been talked about a lot in the census today is housing affordability, how many people have mortgages, how many people rent, mortgage stress, rent stress and so on. Obviously targeting a particular part of the population who can actually afford to have a home or who can rent. How's the housing situation for people who are homeless? Are there enough shelters? Is there enough affordable housing?
Yeah, so I think that's really a government thing to comment on, for those guys to come back and say whether they think they're providing enough housing or shelters or emergency care or whatever the case is. I mean, for us, it's really about just getting people connected where we can, and it may be a case of something as simple as a haircut or a photograph, or it may be working with Centrelink or housing to get some accommodation, and it could be that sets them on the catalyst back to getting housed and into a good place.
Have you ever come across someone who, say, went to your event one year and got the haircut and got connected with services, and have you managed to figure out what their story is a year later?
Yeah, we have. We've got great stories. So we've had people who have come to us and, have unfortunately had our help and then, not necessarily gotten into housing and so on. But then we've got so many stories of people who have come and then gotten into a better place. So, for example, we had a family that came one year and they were just kind of down on their luck in the car. We got those guys some emergency accommodation, and then they went and set up their own charity in a suburb, which was great. We've had someone that came and wanted just a bus ticket back home, out to the country. We got them that. They got back. They got housed. They got back with their family. They're the small things that we like to do.
And what about all the staff who work on these big projects as well? Obviously, you're in a room. You're talking to people who have a lot of them, I would assume, quite harrowing stories, sharing those stories, sharing their stresses, sharing their experiences. How do the staff kind of manage on a day like that, taking time out, kind of taking time to sort of take a breath and figure out what the best strategy is for them to give advice?
Yeah, so for the service providers who come in, I think it's very challenging for them, and they work in the sector every day, and I take my hat off to those guys. It's a tough job, and you know, they have their own support networks inside their organisations to help support that. As far as Sydney Homeless Connect goes, we're a 100% volunteer organisation, and people come from all sorts of backgrounds in life. I mean, the key for us is it is a really emotional day. It's very confronting, and we're really open with people to say it will be confronting. You do what you can do. If you don't feel that that's right for you to do something, you're not comfortable with it, and you know, you're affected by it, then don't do it. That's perfectly fine. We just want to get you guys connected with the homeless community, and the feedback we get from our volunteers is outstanding.
Well, PeterDurie, I know it's been a huge day for you. Thank you so much for taking time out to drop in. Really
Great,
appreciate
thank you.
it.